Hello. They say kids see everything, but sometimes, it's the people looking after them who notice the most. I never thought our babysitter would be the one to show me the truth about my marriage. Turns out, she knew all along that my wife wasn't just tucking in our son at night. She was sneaking off to someone else's bed. I used to believe in stability. I wasn't the kind of guy who craved drama or went looking for trouble. I liked routine, predictability, knowing that when I came home from work, I'd find my wife, Ava, and our son, Luke, waiting for me. Our marriage had never been perfect, but I thought it was solid. We had built a life together, mortgage, school runs, weekend barbecues, the kind of life that seemed unshakable from the outside. That's why I never suspected anything at first. Ava had always been outgoing, always had a social side that I lacked. She enjoyed going out, making friends, being the center of attention. I admired that about her. She was the one who kept our social life alive, the one who made sure we weren't just another boring suburban couple who let life slip by. When she suggested hiring a babysitter, I didn't think twice about it. It made sense. Our schedules had become busier, and finding someone reliable to watch Luke gave us a bit more freedom. Ava had been the one to pick Emma, a responsible college student from a few streets over. She had come highly recommended, and Luke adored her from the start. At first, things were normal. Ava and I would go out together, leaving Emma to take care of Luke. But then, slowly, Ava started using the babysitter more, without me. She started going out alone, claiming it was just for me time, or girls' nights. I didn't question it. Why would I? She deserved to have time to herself. But then, I started noticing little things. Ava would come home later than she originally said. Sometimes, her excuse for leaving didn't quite add up, like saying she was meeting a friend, only for that friend to later mention they hadn't seen her in weeks. She would take extra care in how she looked, dressing up more than usual, wearing perfume she never used at home. Still, I brushed it off. Then one night, I came home early from a work event and found Emma putting Luke to bed. Ava was nowhere to be seen. When I asked where she was, Emma hesitated. Just for a second, just long enough for something to feel off. She recovered quickly, giving me the excuse Ava had probably fed her. But in that brief moment, I felt something I hadn't before. Doubt. From then on, things started to shift in my mind. I began paying closer attention, noticing patterns I had ignored before. The increased distance, the odd timing of her nights out, the way she was overly defensive when I asked casual questions. I wasn't the kind of husband who tracked his wife's every move. I had never needed to. But now, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. Then, the moment that changed everything happened. It was another one of Ava's nights out, and I was home late from work. Emma had already put Luke to bed and was packing up her things when I walked in. I thanked her, as usual, but just as she was about to leave, she hesitated again. It was that same hesitation I had seen before, that flicker of something she wanted to say but didn't. She left, but the feeling didn't. I sat in the living room, staring at the clock, waiting for Ava to come home. She had told me she'd be back by 10. Then 10:30 passed. 11. Midnight. No messages, no updates. This time, instead of assuming the best, I let the doubt settle in. I checked her location. We had shared it for safety reasons, but I rarely looked. But when I opened the app, expecting to see her somewhere near the bar she had mentioned earlier, I found something else. She wasn't downtown. She was in a residential area, on the other side of the city. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing through possible explanations. Maybe she had car trouble. Maybe she was helping a friend. Maybe. But deep down, I already knew. Ava had lied. And for the first time, I was ready to find out just how deep the betrayal went. I sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the glowing on the location app. My wife wasn't where she said she would be. She was across town, in a quiet residential neighborhood, parked at an address I didn't recognize. The weight of realization settled over me like a suffocating blanket. This was it. The proof I had been too blind to see before. The moment where denial finally gave way to reality. My wife, the woman I had trusted with everything, wasn't just out with friends. She wasn't having a self-care night. She was somewhere she shouldn't be. And she had no idea that I knew. I clenched my jaw, resisting the immediate urge to jump in my car and drive straight there. Storming in, demanding answers, catching her in the act. That might have felt satisfying in the moment, but it wouldn't give me what I really wanted. I didn't just want confirmation. I wanted control. If I handled this right, she wouldn't have a single way to twist the truth. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think. I needed more than just a location. I needed undeniable proof. A plan started forming in my head, fueled by months of ignored suspicions and quiet betrayals. Ava had always been careful with her phone, but I had access to something she probably hadn't considered: our home security cameras. We had installed them mainly for safety reasons, never expecting we'd actually need them for anything else. But now, they were about to become my greatest weapon. I pulled up the app on my phone, scrolling through the footage from earlier that evening. There she was, leaving the house at exactly 7:45 p.m., dressed in something far too nice for a casual girls' night. She had lingered at the door, checking her reflection in the glass, adjusting her lipstick with the kind of precision that wasn't meant for a quick dinner with friends. Then came the detail that sent my stomach twisting into knots. She wasn't carrying her usual purse. Instead, she had taken an overnight bag. My hands tightened around my phone. I had been suspicious before, but this was something else. She wasn't just meeting someone. She had planned to stay. I rewound the footage further, checking the previous nights she had claimed to be out late. It was all there. The same pattern, the same exits, the same careful glances at her phone before she left. I hadn't noticed it before because I had never looked. And then, something else caught my attention. Emma. Our babysitter had arrived just before Ava left, much earlier than usual. And she hadn't looked surprised to be there. In fact, she had acted prepared, almost as if this had become routine. The realization sent a chill down my spine. Emma knew. That hesitation I had seen in her before, the way she always seemed on the verge of saying something. She hadn't been covering for Ava. She had been caught in the middle of something she didn't want to be a part of. I needed to talk to her. But first, I needed to finish what I had started. I made a quick decision, one that would either confirm everything or prove I had finally lost my mind. I left the house, got into my car, and drove, not to Ava's location, but to a spot a few houses down from it. I parked on the side of the street, turning off my lights, my heart pounding in my chest. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. Then, I saw it. Ava's car, parked in the driveway of a modest house. The kind of place you'd never expect something scandalous to happen. A single porch light glowed dimly, casting long shadows over the yard. And then, the front door opened. Ava stepped out. She wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, taller than me, wearing a smug expression like he had just won some kind of prize. He leaned in, pressing a hand to the small of her back, guiding her inside as she laughed, completely at ease. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. There it was. The truth, laid out in front of me with no room for doubt. I could have gone in right then, could have walked up to that door, knocked, and watched her face crumble when she saw me standing there. But that wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel the same sense of violation, the same helplessness I had felt for months. So instead, I reached for my phone. I switched to video mode, zooming in, capturing every movement, every glance, every touch that she had once reserved for me. Ava had spent months sneaking around, thinking she was in control. Now, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I sat there in my car, watching Ava disappear into that house with him. My fingers tightened around my phone as the recording continued, capturing every second of her betrayal, every movement, every touch, every secret glance she thought no one would see. I had all the proof I needed, but something about this felt too easy. I expected to feel rage, expected the kind of uncontrollable fury that made men lose their composure, do something reckless. But what I felt instead was something colder, more calculated. This wasn't about catching her in the act anymore. This was about making sure when I finally struck, she wouldn't have a way to crawl out of it. I stopped the recording and took a deep breath, already running through my options. I could send everything to her friends, her family, her workplace. I could go straight to a lawyer and ensure she walked away from this with nothing. But none of that felt final enough. Then, an idea hit me. I scrolled through my contacts and hesitated for only a second before pressing call. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered, Emma. She sounded surprised, a little nervous. It was late, after all, and I had never called her directly before. But she didn't ask why. It was almost as if she already knew. I kept my voice calm, casual even, telling her I needed to talk. She hesitated again, but then agreed. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from her at a small diner on the other side of town. She looked uneasy, her fingers tapping anxiously against her cup of coffee. And that's when I knew. She had been waiting for this moment. Emma didn't ask why I had called her. She didn't act confused or play dumb. She just stared at me, her expression conflicted, like she was weighing whether she should finally say something. So, I let her. At first, she tried to choose her words carefully. She wasn't sure how much I already knew, wasn't sure if she was about to expose something I wasn't ready to hear. But when I slid my phone across the table and played the video, she went pale. And then, she cracked. Emma hadn't just suspected Ava was cheating. She knew. She had known for months. She had been caught in the middle, stuck in an impossible position, watching the woman who hired her sneak off while she stayed behind to take care of our son. And the worst part? Ava had used her. She hadn't just asked Emma to babysit. She had turned her into an alibi, feeding me lies about when she was home, about when she had left, about where she had been. Ava had instructed her on what to say if I ever asked. Emma's voice wavered as she admitted it all, as she told me about the nights Ava had come home late, the time she had driven her to places she wasn't supposed to be. And that's when she said something that made my blood run cold. Ava hadn't just been cheating. She had introduced our son to him. The weight of it hit me harder than anything else. The thought of that man, of some stranger, sitting with my son, pretending to be just a friend while Ava smiled like it was normal. It made my stomach turn. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm, to keep my thoughts in order. Emma looked at me, waiting for a reaction, maybe expecting me to yell, to storm out, to do something impulsive. But I didn't. Instead, I thanked her. And then, I put the final part of my plan into motion. Ava had taken everything for granted. My trust, my patience, my loyalty. She had used our child as a cover, weaving a lie so deep she thought she was untouchable. Now, I was going to make sure she lost everything. And the best part? She would never see it coming. I had no interest in revenge. I wasn't looking to hurt Ava the way she had hurt me. But what I did want was something real, something undeniable. I wanted her to see what I had seen, to feel what I had felt, to be forced to face the truth instead of hiding behind her perfectly constructed lies. So, when her mother's birthday came up, I saw the perfect opportunity. Ava's mother, Margaret, was the kind of woman who valued tradition, family, and sentimentality above all else. Every year, we celebrated her birthday as a full family event, a big dinner, speeches, and gifts that always leaned toward the personal. Handmade crafts from the grandchildren, framed memories, anything that could be hung on the wall and admired for years to come. Ava had been planning this year's celebration for weeks. She wanted it to be perfect, just like she wanted everything in her life to look perfect from the outside. She had ordered catering, picked out an elegant outfit, and made sure our son had something sweet to say to his grandmother when the time came. She had no idea what I had planned. A few days before the party, I told Ava I had arranged the perfect gift, a framed family portrait for Margaret. I told her I had gone through old photos, found one that captured all of us together, something classic and timeless. Ava had smiled, squeezing my hand, completely unaware that for the first time in months, I was lying right to her face. The truth was, I had ordered a framed picture, but it wasn't of our family. It was of her, with him. The image had been easy enough to get. After all, Ava had left behind a digital trail of her own destruction. I had sifted through messages, scrolled through her secret phone, and found exactly what I needed. Her and David, caught in a candid moment, one neither of them had realized was being captured. It wasn't explicit, wasn't something out of a trashy scandal, but it didn't need to be. It was intimate. The way she leaned into him, the way he had his hand resting on the small of her back, the way her face was tilted up toward him, smiling the way she used to smile at me. That was all it took. I had it printed in high resolution, placed in an expensive, ornate frame, the kind that looked like it belonged on a family wall. Then I had it carefully wrapped in elegant gift paper, tied with a bow. The perfect disguise. The night of the party, I played my part flawlessly. Margaret's house was filled with laughter, conversation, the clinking of glasses as guests settled into their places at the long dining table. Ava was glowing, flitting between guests, making sure everything was perfect. She was proud of this, of how put together everything looked. She had always thrived in these situations, playing the devoted daughter, the picture-perfect wife, the loving mother. I watched her, standing by the fireplace, chatting with relatives who had no idea who she really was. She caught my eye once, smiled, and I smiled back. She had no idea. When it came time for gifts, Margaret sat in her chair at the head of the table, unwrapping each one with that warm, appreciative smile she always had. Handmade gifts from the grandkids, a heartfelt letter from Ava's sister, a necklace from Ava herself. And then, my turn. I handed the package to Margaret with a steady hand, my voice light, casual. I told her it was something personal, something she would love. Margaret unwrapped the paper delicately, the way she always did, careful not to tear too much. I saw Ava watching, her eyes filled with expectation, waiting for the big reveal. The moment the paper fell away, the entire room seemed to freeze. Margaret tilted her head at the frame, confusion flickering across her face. She blinked once, twice, as if trying to make sense of what she was looking at. Then, ever so slightly, her lips parted, and a sharp inhale filled the silence. Ava's reaction was instant. Her face went pale, her body going rigid as she leaned forward slightly, as if she could somehow stop what was already happening. Her father was the first to speak. His voice, normally calm and composed, was sharp. Asking, "What is this?" As he looked at the image, then at Ava, then back at the image. Whispers spread through the table like wildfire. People shifting in their seats, craning their necks to see what had just been revealed. Ava moved quickly, almost knocking over her glass of wine as she reached for the frame, but Margaret held it firmly, her knuckles white as she clutched it to her chest. And then, the realization hit. The people who had loved Ava unconditionally, who had believed in her, who had trusted her, were now staring at undeniable proof of her betrayal. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The room did the work for me. Ava's sister gasped, covering her mouth. A distant cousin muttered something under their breath. Ava's father let out a slow exhale, the kind that carried disappointment more than anger. Ava turned to me, her expression shifting between rage and panic. Her hands trembled at her sides, fists forming, unraveling, forming again. I just met her gaze calm. She had no words. What could she possibly say? That it wasn't what it looked like? That I had somehow twisted reality? That I had fabricated this out of thin air? No, there was nothing left for her to do. Margaret, bless her, didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. She simply placed the frame down on the table, took a steady breath, and looked her daughter in the eye. And in that moment, I saw something break in Ava. Not because she was sorry, but because she knew she had lost. This wasn't just our marriage collapsing. This was her entire world unraveling in front of her. And I just sat back and watched. Ava didn't break down immediately. At first, she just sat there, frozen, staring at the picture on the table like it might somehow change if she looked long enough. The room was silent, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that makes your skin crawl. Her mother's hand hovered over the frame, her face twisted in something between horror and disgust. Her father wouldn't even look at her. Her sister sat with her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes darting between Ava and me, as if waiting to see how this train wreck would end. Ava's breathing grew uneven. Her hands trembled as she reached for the frame, but her mother pulled it away before she could touch it, as if she didn't even want Ava's fingerprints on it. That's when the reality of the situation hit her. She wasn't going to talk her way out of this. She wasn't going to charm, manipulate, or gaslight her way back into control. Everyone saw the truth, and there was no rewriting it this time. Then, the waterworks started. Tears spilled down her face as she turned to me, desperation creeping into her expression. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked, her words a mess of gasps and sobs. She begged. She told me she had made a mistake, that she didn't know what she was thinking, that she had been lost. She swore that it had meant nothing, that she never stopped loving me, that she never wanted to hurt our family. She pleaded with me, saying that if I just gave her a chance, if I just listened, we could fix this. But I didn't listen. I just stood there, watching as she unraveled in front of everyone she had spent years lying to. She reached for my hands, but I took a step back. That's when her panic deepened. She wasn't just begging for forgiveness anymore. She was begging not to lose everything. And it was too late for that. I had already filed for divorce. The papers were waiting for her, sitting neatly on the table beside the picture of her and him. The house? Already in the process of being sold. The accounts? Locked down. She had nothing left to hold on to. Then, her attention shifted. She turned to our son, Luke, who had been watching from the corner of the room, confused but quiet, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. She called his name, her voice thick with tears, but he didn't move. He just looked at her, his young face full of something no child should ever have to feel, betrayal. That was when Ava truly broke. She sobbed, saying she couldn't lose him, saying she would do anything to fix things. But she had no choice in the matter. I had already made the decision. Luke was staying with me. He deserved stability, deserved honesty, deserved a home that wasn't built on lies. She had destroyed our family the moment she decided to sneak around behind my back. Now, she was the one who had to live with the consequences. With nothing left to say, I walked away, leaving her to crumble under the weight of her own choices. The last thing I heard as I stepped out of the house was her mother's voice, low and cold. I hope it was worth it. And judging by the look on Ava's face, she already knew it wasn't. Bye-bye.